fight commentary breakdowns here, and this is probably going on fight commentary chats. So we have here Randy from Mantis Boxing. Welcome, Randy.
Thanks, Jerry. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you in person. And I got this referral from Sensei Ando. I asked Ando who else is cool like him, and he said Randy. So I said, okay, let's talk to Randy.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah, definitely. So, Randy, tell me about Mantis Boxing. First of all, I assume it's Kung Fu based. It has foundations and fundamentals in Kung Fu.
Yep, it's a Chinese boxing system, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of it before?
The only kind of Mantis I've done is wushu, kind of like dance type of Mantis. Yeah. So I know that doesn't represent probably what the practical type of functional Mantis is. But yeah, tell me more.
So did you do the actual wushu set? That was I forget who choreographed
It's been so long that honestly I don't remember if I did the entire set or just did some moves. But I know of Mantis, but I cannot even claim that I know anything beyond knowing of Mantis.
Mantis Boxing, comes from China, obviously. Qing Dynasty, late Qing Dynasty, sometime between 1800 and 1900, it first starts to appear up in Yantai. And there's just a amalgamation of events that it ended up on the radar later. Otherwise, like many of the other systems, it probably would have been lost.
And what got you into Chinese martial arts?
Stationed in Texas in the Army, and I had taken up Taekwondo, and sparring with a friend of mine who grew up doing Kung Fu with his father in the backyard. And we would spar, and he would just work circles around me all the time. And everything we were doing in Taekwondo was straight in, straight back, straight in, straight back. And he was circling left, circling right. So in my ignorance of martial arts in general, I assumed, okay, well, Kung Fu is better than Taekwondo. I must find Kung Fu someday. I'm going to study this. And a few years out of the military, I did find a teacher doing Kung Fu. And I started taking that up then. It was Mantis. So I had never heard of Mantis Boxing prior to that. I didn't grow up on Kung Fu films and stuff, so I hadn't seen a lot of the animal styles or the other things that were going on.
Interesting that basically, unlike a lot of people who grew up on Kung Fu films, your first exposure was sparring that Kung Fu person and being like, whoa, this person's doing some cool stuff.
Yeah. Wow. And then it took me years and years to find somebody that could spar with it again.
After you started doing Mantis Kung Fu, did you do other styles of Kung Fu too? And did you keep up with your Taekwondo training, or was it mostly just Mantis?
No, I tried Taekwondo briefly when I got out of the military in New England, and it didn't go well. It just wasn't my thing. And I did start with Mantis, did that for a little while, and then I started learning other styles of Chinese martial arts, but all forms, and I really hadn't begun doing what I would say is real Mantis at that point. And then I started doing Eagle Claw and Long Fist and Hung Guard, Tai Chi, Xing Yi, just a bunch of the weapons for probably about 7 years.
What makes Mantis unique compared to all the other forms of Chinese martial arts?
What I know now, it's a stand-up grappling art. So, however, not much. Really, there's a lot of similarity in the Chinese boxing systems from the north, and a lot of them are rooted in grappling, wrestling, the Shuaijiao or the Mongolian wrestling Bok. So there's a lot of heritage that was carried down through that, and you can find those in Tai Chi Chuan as well, Bagua, Mantis, Eagle Claw. So as far as it being truly unique from the others, I wouldn't go so far as to say that it is, because they all have those 4 pillars: striking, kicking, throws, and locks. So it's just how you use it, I guess.
Wow. That's so interesting. And you teach, right? You currently you teach as in addition to practicing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. How was the transition? When did you decide, all right, I think I'm qualified. I have these skills enough to teach people?
I don't know as if I ever felt qualified. It just was something that I was not very happy in my career, and I was always leaving to go train. So I would train in the middle at lunch classes, go back and train all night. And then
Nice.
I just decided at one point that, all right, I've had enough. I'm just going to start teaching this and be a martial artist for a living and see how that goes.
Yeah. Sometimes those are the best teachers, man. The ones who didn't think, oh, yeah, I wanted to teach, but then people wanted to learn from you. So, I think that's a sign you're a good teacher.
Thanks. Appreciate that. But it was fairly early in my journey that I started teaching. So,
wow, that's cool.
Didn't really feel ready.
What do you think students of Kung Fu, that is, what do you think students of Kung Fu need to keep in mind when they start on their Kung Fu journey?
Depends what you want to get out of it. Like if you're, so you did wushu, right?
Yeah.
You did.
And a little bit of Wing Chun, but mostly wushu.
How long did you do that?
Way too long, for something like 6 years.
Let me ask you a question before I answer it.
When
you started, what was your intent? Like, what did you?
I was 4 or 5, so my parents just put me in it.
Oh, so you were really young.
Yeah.
So you didn't have a choice.
I didn't have a choice. I ended up liking it because I jumped around all the time, and so it was cool. But when I went back to China, the wushu training wasn't as fun because they would hit you and stuff like that, right? So then I didn't want to go anymore. But then my parents were like, no, you gotta go. But those 2 years in China were actually pretty good because those 2 years in China, like, we did a little bit more than just dancing. Like, we did compliance drills, and there wasn't sparring, but there was more compliance drills. And I got my sparring out of the way in school. I got into a lot of fights, so the wushu training helped because I got to practice in a different way.
Yeah. Tested in school, but train on the side.
Yeah, exactly. So then when I came back to America, that was like the dark period because I guess it's just different here in America, especially when it's commercialized. The first wushu school I went to, this was in the Chicago area. She was like a world champion or something, but she didn't teach it for money, I don't think. So she just wanted to teach it. So it was a very good class, and I was so little, I probably didn't see any behind the scenes drama. China is like, I'm sure at the Shaolin you paid some money. I don't know how much, but it wasn't like you were limited by class numbers or whatever. Just like you just went, you would learn, he would hit you if you did something wrong. And sometimes class would go 4 hours because he just felt like teaching you more, right? And then you come to America and it's just so commercialized, and I just kept getting hurt. So that's why I took a really long break in my martial arts journey after that. I didn't do martial arts in high school or college. I only got back into martial arts after college. It's crazy.
And that's when you took up Wing Chun?
I did a little bit of Kempo first, and then I did Kempo, and then I did a little bit of Muay Thai. But even when I was doing Muay Thai, I had weak glutes that I didn't know about, and so it was still inflamed from my Kung Fu injury. So I had to quit Muay Thai because it was hurting when I kicked. Wow. So then I came to LA briefly. I did a little bit of Wing Chun, and then eventually, after another period of just being like, okay, maybe this is not my life, I went into BJJ, and then now I do boxing. Yeah, so nice. I've had a very weird journey, but I've been exposed to a lot of stuff, which was cool.
I think that's a good thing because sometimes when we get too focused on one thing, we drink the Kool-Aid, and we don't see what the rest of the field looks like. Yeah. Especially in martial arts where we're vulnerable to other styles. Yeah. I mean, if we just do boxing, then that's it. And then we go up against the grappler, we're in for some surprises.
Yeah. Or,
But the reason,
grapplers think they can strike, right? All the grapplers who, man, you ought to see gnarly striking. Look at grapplers teaching striking.
I know. Because if you think about, so that's one of the things with a good Chinese boxing system. You have those 4 pillars, but all of them are a specialty in and of themselves.
Yeah.
They're not like you could spend your life doing just boxing. You could spend it just doing kicking, or you could just throwing. But the reason I asked you was, but you started in a different way than a lot of people, where your parents made you do it.
Mm-hmm.
But myself, I didn't get into Kung Fu. I saw it in action being used against me and kicking my butt. So I had a lot of respect for it. And that's not what I found when I got into it. It took me years to find what I had originally seen. And then the field was very small. So a large portion of people that do join and their intent is to learn how to fight or learn how to do self-defense, then my advice would be very different than if somebody's just joining for exercise or because they saw somebody doing wushu or forms in a park and they want to do that. So
I love what you said, because I think my experience with Kung Fu is the same. Like, very few of the Kung Fu people I trained under, I think, really taught me anything functional. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, those 2 years in Shaolin going. And then here's the thing, like, when I was doing Kung Fu, when I was in Chicago, I actually had a karate teacher too, but I have never given him credit until last year. So I realized a lot of what I attributed to Kung Fu helping me was actually the karate. So it's like, I'm not saying Kung Fu didn't help me, but karate actually helped me a lot more. Because in karate, you did more compliance drills than what we did in Kung Fu. So as a kid, suddenly I'm throwing all these sequences, and I thought it was my Kung Fu training. No, it's all the karate. Throw the chop after the kick. That was from karate. And I didn't give that credit because I was doing so much Kung Fu in China. All I thought was about my Kung Fu training. But, and even in my Kung Fu training in China, we did compliance drills, but not the type where you throw a bunch of combos on people. We would practice throws on each other, or maybe we would practice break fall or something. But it wasn't like, okay, punch them and kick them and chop them. That was very karate when you did it on a partner.
But and you said something that's came up last week with my girlfriend's daughter asked me, because we do, she joins us for these workouts that we do 2 times a week that are kind of based on martial arts, but they're mission oriented, a lot of strength conditioning, cardio, plyometrics. But in there, one of the workouts I have doing strike to kick. So 3 strikes and then I throw a kick on the bag, then reversed it. So I had 100 of those and then 100 kick followed by 3 strikes. And she said, "What's the difference?" They're the same thing. I said, they're not. Because your mind, you got to learn to throw the strikes and then follow it up with a kick.
Yeah.
And then if you throw a kick and somebody moves, or they don't move back and you have the range shrink up on you, you got to be able to switch to striking.
Yeah.
So that's what you were just saying too about your karate training, is it starts forming those pathways where you follow up with something.
Yeah.
You don't just one and done.
Yeah, exactly. Because just like you said, I will never forget this fight I had when I was in China. This kid, I kicked and it didn't push him back. Instead, he kept coming. So naturally, the chop came at his neck, right? But that was from karate. It's like I remember the person teaching me karate. It's like, you kick him. Oh, sometimes he's gonna come forward. Oh, what do? Well, he's gonna reveal his neck. You chop him. So it's like, and all the kids were like, "Whoa, how'd Jerry do that?" And I didn't even know. And then years later, I thought about it. It's from all those karate lessons.
I've been programmed.
Yeah, I've been programmed, but you don't realize that. And people, I think I've talked to Ando about this, but the other person Ando referred me to, Karate Unity. I was talking to him a lot about this, but compliance drills are so useful, man, especially for kids to build up kind of muscle memory. So there's a lot of the combat sports that really kind of they love talking smack about compliance drills, but it's like, even in boxing, we're not doing compliance drills, but you train sequences. Those are kind of like compliance drills. You got to think that. It's the same thing, building a muscle memory. Okay, let's hook, jab, hook, cross. You got to practice that, except you're not practicing on a person standing there. I have a rope or something. I'm practicing on the rope, right? But it's like the same kind of thing. You're practicing little muscle memories.
And you can do it with a person
Yeah.
where you come in, we call them feeder drills.
Yeah, yeah.
So you come in and if we're trying to train somebody on a specific like combination or a certain kick or certain strike, you can't do it under resistance and in sparring and expect the person to learn because they're stressed.
Yeah.
So you come in and you throw it, and
Yeah.
they may like, okay, I'm going to block the first two and let you hit me on the third.
Yeah.
So that you actually get that feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be something hard enough to hurt the other person because it's compliant, but you're getting something very valuable out of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but going back to what we were talking about, especially with Kung Fu and, some of its evolution now, I think that's a conversation that every student needs to have. It's like, okay, what am I in it for? Am I trying to learn this to defend myself, or am I trying to learn this to look pretty? I think that's a really good conversation, especially if people want to learn Kung Fu. It's something they have to really figure out initially, because schools vary a lot, man, especially if you want to learn kind of like real self-defense.
They do, and this is a question that no matter what you're doing for Kung Fu, if somebody's starting to take it up, is you should ask the teacher.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do, and is this what I'm going to learn? Hopefully they're honest, because I've seen teachers that aren't honest about that. But I may have told this story before, but I have a good friend of mine that actually started my school with. We were partners. He had another business, so he just didn't have the time to do both.
Mm-hmm.
But we were both instructors at another school.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, early on in his training, before he ended up at that school, he was training with someone in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that was a traditional Chinese teacher, was there 4 years, did all these long fist forms, but he wanted to learn how to fight.
Mm-hmm.
So he went to the teacher and he said, this is great. I enjoy what I'm doing. Thank you. Appreciate it. But when are you going to show me how to fight with these? When can I learn that? And he told him, when you can show up my house every day and pick me up for work, drop off my dry cleaning, get my groceries, and if you do that for 8 years, I'll show you how to fight with this. I wish I were making that story up.
Wow.
So some people can't be honest. It's not just martial arts. We find this anywhere in life, but that's what I would do, is ask the teacher, what am I going to be learning, and based on the goals that you have.
Yeah.
You just want to get in shape, and you don't want to get hurt. You just want to do something that looks like martial arts. Then there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Don't walk into a school where they're going to be doing full contact sparring and throws, and then the inverse. If that's what you want, don't go to a school that's doing forms-based training and martial dance, if you will.
Yeah. Wow. That story, I've heard stuff like that, but this is the first time I heard of like someone basically tell it without like being facetious. Like, wow, that's crazy.
I wish I were. And then he found the same thing at the next school, where he went specifically to learn how to fight. And they said, okay, but before I show you that, here, let me show you this form. What?
Yeah.
Still, you want to learn how to fight? You're going to show me a form?
Yeah. Wow.
It's crazy.
And you think about a lot of those kind of fake masters in China that keep getting on the news and getting. I have a feeling they do that to their students too. Oh, you join the system, be able to like break the inside of a watermelon. But first, before I show you that, you got to do this and this and this for me.
Do you remember that show? I don't know if you ever saw this show. It was on maybe 10 years ago. It was called Fight Science.
Yes.
The two guys would travel around. One of them was a big football player. The other was the martial arts guy.
Yes, I remember. One was kind of an MMA guy. The other was like a martial arts guy. And it was a big kind of like bald guy, right?
Yep.
I think.
Yeah, he was an ex-football player.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he did MMA.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the other guy's background. They went to China and they went to Shaolin.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching that episode, and he was trying to learn the iron palm from one of the monks. And the monk wouldn't just, he started him on these bricks. Now, you probably know this, the Chinese bricks are softer.
Yeah,
they're
softer.
easier to
Yeah,
break,
you could smash a head. At least the old days. Now the bricks may be a little better, but back in the old days, like people didn't realize the quality of the bricks weren't
right.
that good. That's why you could like smack people's heads and not kill them.
Yeah,
Now
or
you don't
punch
want to
through
do
the
that.
brick wall,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So I was watching him show. Let me grab this, see if I can show you what was going on. So I'm watching the video, and he's sitting there watching him punch this brick, and it's not breaking, and he's not saying anything. And I'm looking at the brick, and the brick is sitting like this on the ledge.
Yeah.
So there's no way,
Yeah.
even though the brick is weak, there's no way he was going to break it because he's hitting.
Yeah, he's hitting
not
that.
enough there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's not enough leverage.
Yeah.
The fulcrum's off.
Yeah.
And I swear he broke his hand. Trying to do this. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what?
Yeah. I got to see that episode then. Wow.
Yeah. I can't remember if that was on National Geographic or what channel.
Yeah, there was a couple of them. There was Fight Science on National Geographic. There's Fight Quest on.
Oh, it was
Fight Quest.
It was not Fight Science.
And then there's Human Weapon. There was 3 of them: Fight Science, Fight Quest, and Human Weapon.
Yeah. Now I saw some of your videos. I think I mentioned that to you when you reached out to me. I like what you're doing, and it's really cool. And I saw the ones I mostly saw were around the fake masters with.
Oh yeah, that was those videos got the channel pretty viral for a while. Yeah.
But so you probably are aware. I mean, this was kind of a problem with the Chinese government backing the wrong horse.
Yeah, exactly.
They chose to back wushu and tai chi and just insist that these were something they're not anymore.
Yeah.
And even if they were at one point in time, that time is 120 years dead.
Yeah.
And it was baffling to me. I know why. But it was baffling to me at first on the surface is why wouldn't you back something like Shuai Jiao that actually works and people can take that into a cage like you might find a judo person that doesn't have very good striking, and years ago in the UFC they did okay.
Yeah.
But you could do the same, but you can't take somebody that has been doing forms for 60 years and throw them in a match against a 6-month boxer. They're going to get their ass kicked.
Yeah. Even a 1-month boxer will beat someone who's been doing forms for 60 years.
Yeah. As you've highlighted in these videos.
Yeah, it's crazy. I went back to China last year and I talked to my old Kung Fu coach. So not the one in Chicago, my first one, but my second one, the one that hit me and stuff. And he said, yeah, dude, if you kept training with us, we would have very quickly, because, you were good. Like I was good as in I looked pretty. Doesn't mean I was good at fighting. Right. I was good. I looked pretty. You were good and you seemed interested, even though I wasn't that interested. It's just my parents forced me. So I was very kind of like loyal. But anyways, they're like, if you were to keep training, and if we were to want to make you really represent Kung Fu, we would have made you do more Sanda. That's what they said. So, this is Chengdu, right? Chengdu people are just a little more hardcore. And I don't know if that's the case in other parts of China, but they told me, and this could be kind of almost like they've been seeing what's been going on with Kung Fu masters getting beat up. So this is their new strategy. And, but maybe in the 90s, if I didn't come to America again, I would have still just did like forms. I wouldn't have done Sanda concurrently with the wushu, but that's what they claimed they would have had me do if I kept training with them.
I may be off on this. It's just guess from watching the Chinese martial arts so I started in 99. Watching the transformation, I would say the Sanda stuff didn't start to pick up until the early 2000s. Yeah. When the UFC was becoming a bigger and bigger deal. And then they started realizing, okay, we need to have something represent, but it was very low level. Yeah. And I know people that did go to China in the 90s and they did not do Sanda. They were all wushu forms training.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny you mention it because in the 90s, when I was briefly in China for 2.5 years, I did remember people mention Sanda, but it was
Yeah.
always an afterthought, right? So I think that confirms what you were saying. Even if there were Sanda schools, which I know most big cities have Sanda schools, it was probably like if you trained and signed up, people thought you had an issue. I think I'm really I'm serious about that. Like if you trained and signed up, people thought you were like an ex gangster or like someone who
Yeah.
was on the wrong side of the tracks. That's why you had to go fight. That's literally the vibe.
Like that.
I don't think it's like that anymore. But in the '90s,
even
that
in
was
the 90s,
definitely
because that was the. I don't know if you ever read Chinese martial arts training manuals by Brian Kennedy, Elizabeth Guo.
Ooh, I have not seen that.
Brian was long time. He's deceased now, but he was a lifelong martial artist, and he was very jaded. You could tell by the time he wrote this book, he was very upset with what he had been sold on as Chinese martial arts. And I think he was always on a quest to find the answers. And I didn't know him personally, so just speaking from reading his books and stuff. But he highlighted in there that the difference between the Japanese culture and the Chinese culture was with regards to martial arts, where the Japanese, where the warrior caste was up here above everybody, but in China it was down here.
Yeah.
Because you were a thug, you were a ruffian, you were a brigand, or you were a soldier.
Yeah.
That changed though. There were older periods. Peter Lorge wrote his Chinese martial arts training manuals, or Chinese martial arts from antiquity to the 21st century.
Oh, that sounds like a great book. For viewers, I'm going to put all of these links down in the description so you guys can search it up later. Wow, these are cool books that I'm going to have to check out.
That's definitely a good one you want to pick up. I interviewed him a couple months ago on my podcast, and we talked about his book. But in there, he shows at different periods in different dynasties, the warriors and the soldiers, martial artists were at different levels in the societal caste. They were not always at the bottom.
Yeah. I think that is something so interesting. And really, if I were to look at a time where kind of like you could represent the current, like, China likes to say that it's got 5,000 years of history, which is true, but that history has been kind of like cut and, invaders, etc. So I wouldn't say the thinking of Chinese people is from 5,000 years ago. If I were to trace to where like the current Chinese mentality is, I would say it's from the Song Dynasty, because the Song Dynasty, they had this era of peace because them and the Qidong, the Liao people, they became brother nations, so they stopped fighting each other for like 100 years or something. There's relative peace, so the merchant class, the scholars, were like really on top. And since there's not really that much war, there's a lot of kind of like economic kind of BS going on. A lot of this kind of like even like inflation, what we currently think of like printing paper money, was invented in the Song Dynasty. A lot of this current like crazy capitalism thing like started in the Song Dynasty. But it's pretty interesting. And so I think of like the whole Chinese mentality, and I think I think you could trace it back to the Song Dynasty. Of course, this goes into politics. There are people like, I think a lot of Japanese scholars would say, no, actually the real China died when the Song Dynasty lost to the Mongols. So the current China, when the Ming took over, when the Qing took over, etc., that's not real China, right? But again, it's getting political. I don't know. All I know.
Politics are also somebody not wanting to admit their past.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's revise it. Let's change it. But because that's something I wasn't aware of either until the last 2 years, was about the Mongol invasion of Japan.
Yeah.
And that sumo came from Mongolian wrestling.
Oh, that is interesting. I would have never known that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. And so there was a lot of cross-pollination going on, but not necessarily something that people want to admit to.
Yeah. Oh, that is so interesting. That I would have not known, but wow. Yeah, because you would assume those two invasions of Japan, a lot of soldiers were captured, right? A lot of Chinese, Korean, Japanese soldiers, sorry, Chinese, Korean, and Mongolian soldiers were captured. So of course a lot of this knowledge would have spread to Japan.
It's pretty cool how things spread out, and then karate being something that originated. Well, it's a blend of the Okinawan indigenous martial arts with the Southern Chinese boxing systems that they would find in the Tang Dynasty
Yeah.
when the nobles would cross the sea. Did you ever read Gichin Funakoshi's book, Karate Do?
I have
That's definitely a worthwhile read because he's the reason that anybody even knows karate today. He's the one that brought it from Okinawa to mainland Japan. But by the time he did, he admits that he had never been in a fight in his entire life.
Wow.
He most of the training was forms based, aside from like body hardening exercises, iron body if you're talking Chinese martial arts. But the training had already shifted because of the Japanese control of Okinawa. They didn't allow the martial arts. But I read that book back in, I think, 1999. My first Kung Fu teacher had told me about it, and it was amazing. I learned a ton from that.
Wow. Cool. I'm going to put that link. There's 4 of those books on Amazon. Oh, there's a lot actually. So wow, I'm going to put all of them. I'm gonna link all of them.
I didn't mean to make you spend money today.
Oh, this is great. This is great. I mean, this is where knowledge comes from, right? It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, here's another thing. There was actually a book published that disputed the jiu-jitsu kind of factoid that 90 or 80% of fights end up on the ground. So, like sometimes books are worth it. It's worth it to do research because there's this like holy grail thing in like Western grapplers, then 80 or 90% of fights end up on the ground. And apparently that's not true if you look at police reports.
Yeah, I'd like to see more data on that because I do see that getting thrown around a lot. However, I don't know how tall or heavy you are, but I'm 5'6" and I weigh about 139 pounds. So when I get into sparring and grappling, I usually do end up on the ground.
I see.
That's why BJJ is such a nice thing to have.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's always who's writing the narrative. Like, what are you selling? Because if you talk to anybody who's selling wrestling or grappling, they're gonna want that to be true too.
Yeah, exactly.
That most fights end up on the ground.
Yeah.
And then if you're a Krav Maga teacher, no.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So, where are you at now in your martial arts journey? Are you incorporating more stuff, or is it still mostly Kung Fu based? Tell me about that.
Let me see. That's a tough question to answer. So, let me start with the first part of your question, if you would. Once you hit a certain point, you may already know this. So let's say we use a belt system. You go white. We use like jiu-jitsu's white, blue, purple. So you start out at white belt and you know nothing. And you're like just trying to pull in everything. Blue belt, you can actually see more stuff. So you keep pulling more stuff in. And then purple belt, you're pulling less in. You're pulling more in around specific things that you do, positions you go to the most, sweep submissions that you work the most, that you follow up with chains. And then you actually reverse the curve and you start going back in, like the hourglass starts to shrink in again as a brown belt and a black belt. And when you do get that black belt level, I had my BJJ teacher said it really well, is not interested in more stuff. I'm interested in going deeper in the stuff that I already do.
Makes sense.
So that's my personal journey, is that there's things that I gravitate to, and I want to know. It's like branches and roots. Like, okay, I went here, they countered there, go here, or go here, or go here, and then they countered it again, or something else happens, you got to change position. So everything's just branching off, but the main trunk is, it's not like you're building new branches off the main trunk.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I look at my personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as Mantis, I kind of just do my own thing. I took a lot of the forms apart, reverse engineered the applications, found what was working when we were sparring, and that's what I teach. So it's functional. That's what I want. That's what I always wanted out of Chinese boxing, was something functional. So.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people who really love martial arts want, right? It's just like ultimately behind anything, there's something that worked. Well, it's not like, even I've read this even among some Chinese martial arts vloggers. They say that Chinese martial arts have never worked, which makes me a little bit suspicious. I don't think it's never worked. So
no, that's not true.
Yeah,
it wouldn't have survived. So I think Dr. Lorge in his book talks about forms even existing 4,000 years ago. They were used as ways to intimidate the opponent on the battlefield. But the Chinese have the oldest weapon, the oldest tool that was designed to strictly to kill another human being. Wow. Had no other purpose, was developed in China. They discovered it a few years ago. And I forget how old it is now, but thousands of years old. And they've got a lot of experience with using stuff practically and for real. And I would say, so the true collapse was the early 1900s. But prior to that, it was working. It was functional.
Yeah. And I think in one of those Taiwanese little mini docs that we looked at on Fight Commentary Breakdowns, the Taiwanese Kung Fu scholar was the same. He said it was like probably in the Qing Dynasty, there was a time when they said, okay, no more practicing Kung Fu, man, because a lot of you rebels are doing it, So the Qing Dynasty put a lid on it. And so a lot of people seem to say it was like, oh yeah, the communists did it. No, it was way before. It seemed like it was like during the Qing Dynasty.
Well, and there was a shift in the 1890s. So you had the boxer uprisings, and you had a lot of shamanism surrounding Chinese martial arts incorporated with some of it. And they believed that their chi was going to stop bullets.
Oh, yeah. A very sad time. And most Chinese people think about that time with no history. They're like, wow, yeah, that's such a sad time in Chinese history. Like, what happened, man? The mysticism. Wow.
So firearms had existed for a long time in China.
And China invented firearms too.
But they weren't as evolved. I mean, if you think like what was going on in the United States in the late 1800s, Wild West. And then you see the repeater rifle appear. You see Gatling guns appear, and then you're still talking single shot firearms in China. Yeah. So when they start seeing this stuff come in, it vastly changed the warfare. Yeah. But the Qing dynasty resisted it at first. They didn't want to change tactics. They didn't want to incorporate stuff from the West. Yeah. But when they started to, in the North anyway, when you started to see this collapse with some of these uprisings and people getting shot and killed, it changed the mentality of the martial arts. It's like, why bother? Yeah. What's the point when you can just train somebody? Even Qi Ji Guang, which he was a famous general. Have you heard of him?
Tell me more about him.
He's a character you definitely want to look into, because he was in 1560. He was a general that led. He wrote a book, a manual on Chinese martial arts, like warfare. So it had a section on archery. It had a section on hand-to-hand combat, spear, firearms. So he is pivotal in the history of our Chinese martial arts, because he actually documented. He did a survey in Yantai in 1560 of the martial arts that were alive at the time. and he makes observations. Well, they were really good with their hands, but they had nothing for their feet. They were good at throwing, but they didn't have any striking. So
Wow.
the moves that he put together, a training system for hand-to-hand combat for his troops, 32 moves that a bulk of still exist today in Taiji Chuan.
Wow.
And when he put these together, he then led forces to fight the Wuku pirates.
Yeah.
And after his experience with trying to train villagers in fighting these pirates, he came back and he removed the chapter in his military manual on hand-to-hand combat because he found it a waste of time.
Oh, wow.
This was 24 years after he wrote his first manual. He changed his mind and said, forget it. He put more emphasis on firearms.
Yeah, yeah.
Firearm tactics. So we can see in the Ming Dynasty that there was already this shift. Like, why spend all this time doing this?
Yeah.
But it didn't go away. So it's still around. But then you go through the Qing Dynasty, fast forward a few hundred years, and now you get faced with Western encroachment and people getting embarrassed with getting shot and killed with firearms. Yeah. So now we go into, you probably are aware of the history of that time period with all the droughts, the famine, the floods, millions of people getting killed. And China has to reshape itself in the eyes of the world. Yeah. And they start using martial arts as physical education, but not fighting. Yeah. So you see the Jingwu, you see the Nanqing Wushu Institute erupt. Yeah. So that's really the point in time that you can trace back and say, here it is. This is when it stopped being used for fighting, and it completely changed.
Wow. That's so interesting. So what I'm really learning from you is it wasn't just kind of like a government decree that said no practice in wushu. It was more like even if the government said no, it would have just fallen out of favor anyways, because everyone, even military leaders, would have been like, what's the point? You train someone how to fight well, they're just going to get shot if they don't know how to fight. It's kind of like when crossbows and guns started coming about, archery stopped being as trained, right? Because you train you train to be a good archer. Someone with a crossbow will learn it in 20 minutes and just shoot you.
Have you seen that guy? What's his name? His videos went viral a few years ago.
He's like, bring the real archery back. He would like catch an arrow, or he would like shoot another arrow out of the air. Yeah, that's what archery used to be.
He went to stories in the Bible that we thought were made up, and he went to murals that were drawn like with the 3 arrows in the bow, and people thought it was just a symbol. Yeah. And recreated the actual tactics, but those things were lost because nobody cared about archery anymore.
Yeah. Lars Anderson, that's his name.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, dude, we should you and I should have like a podcast with him. We should interview him.
Yeah, that would be cool. I'd be curious.
I think what you mentioned here and what he's mentioning is something so important that we have to think about with martial arts too. Sometimes just because it can't be done now doesn't mean it's completely fake, right? Yes, if someone claims they can throw a fireball in the air, that's probably fake. But, other things, there's certain other things that just because we can't do it now doesn't mean maybe people didn't have the skill back then. I think it's something, and Lars Anderson showed a little bit of that with archery.
Yeah, and you could see it when you rebuild a Chinese boxing system, you can see it. It's like they're not just dance moves. They're not just flair. There's some stuff that is like there's no reason for these Mantis moves. It is a brand, and that's all it was. It was somebody that took like that on guard stance that you see at the beginning and end of like Hong Chuan, or you see it in Mei Hua Chuan, the plum blossom, and then they went, okay, we're Mantis.
Yeah.
And there's obviously questions of why, but. Why did they start doing that? But it's not functional. But hooking somebody's neck, doing clinch work, hooking the tricep, doing all these hooking methods are something that was handed down as they're actually Shuaijiao techniques.
Yeah.
They're hooks that are used when somebody doesn't have a gi or a jacket and you're trying to hold on to them. So that's where you can transform and you can see somebody taking something like Mantis and saying, okay, well, we focus heavily on these clinching moves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so fascinating, man.
So yeah,
And
things get lost. I agree with you.
yeah, and for viewers, that book that Randy was talking about, I actually found an English translation too. So for those who don't read Chinese, I'll put a link to it was like a military school thesis or something, but someone tried to
Yeah.
translate it.
Let me see. I have it written down here. Let me see if
Yeah.
you found the one that because Dr. Lorge actually recommended. Somebody had recently done a translation of it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a guy that translated it. I don't think he's a scholar though.
Mm-hmm.
I think he just was able to speak the language, so he was able to put that together.
Wow.
Bear with me 1 second. Baron von Nordum.
Let's see if that's the one I found. Oh, that's not the one I found. The one I found is just a random student translating it. So yeah.
Or Israel. I don't have his last name.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the author? You know?
It was just a University of Arizona student, I think. So cool. But I'll find another one. Yeah.
There's a lot of interest in him going on nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? If your masters keep getting beat up, then you're gonna have to do some soul searching. I mean, if you go on Chinese social media now, that stupid Wing Chun fraud who keeps getting beat up, the Yu Cheng Hua dude who claims he's a third generation Ip Man disciple, that guy, you can't find search results of him anymore. The Chinese government's wiped him. They're like, we don't want you embarrassing us anymore. They're giving him the same treatment that Shu Xiaodong got. Yeah, you can't find.
So they reversed it.
They reversed it, yeah. So now you can't find anything related to Yu Cheng Hua anymore. It's really funny.
So it was interesting. I don't know if you saw the last month, the South China Morning Post actually had an article about China saying these guys can't say they're masters anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
And my understanding of that newspaper is it's completely controlled by the Communist Party, and you cannot say anything in that newspaper unless they give you the go-ahead, the green light. So for them to actually put that in that paper was, I thought, enlightening. It was a turning point, finally, that they stopped backing that horse, that wushu horse or that forms-based horse.
Yeah, exactly. And then I just want to correct what I said. It looks, I just did a search result thing to look again, and it looks like you can find him again. So for a few days there was like radio silence on the guy on YouTube, but it looks like now you can find him again. I don't know what happened because he got beat up by a Bruce Lee wannabe. He got into a match with a Bruce Lee wannabe. So it's like a Wing Chun master versus a Bruce Lee wannabe. Not even like some guy who's really trained, just some guy who's like looked at Bruce Lee and the Bruce Lee wannabe beat him. So like Yu Cheng Hua's search results were really suppressed for a while, but it looks like he's back. We're able to find him again.
So if they started to relax their controls or their campaign against Shu Xiaodong?
From what I can tell, it's probably a little better. And here's how I know: Shu Xiaodong has an Instagram, right? He posts on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Shu Xiaodong's been publicly meeting up with fans now. Like this is Shu Xiaodong meeting up with his fans. So Shu Xiaodong's going different places. Like this is Nanjing.
Yeah, they must have let it up because he wasn't even allowed to travel before, right?
He was allowed to travel. He just couldn't.
I thought they had removed his social points or something, so you can't get on.
So that was for a month. That was just because he refused to apologize. So that was for a month until he apologized. So with that, he just only could take really, really shitty trains. So yeah, that was a pretty hard month for him. And that was pretty bad. But yeah, a lot of the reporting got it kind of incorrect because they didn't know the extent of how long his social credit was reduced. So there's this assumption, and some of it has to do with certain YouTubers who kind of like didn't get the full picture. But it created this assumption in people that he's still living under restrictions, which is not the case. It only happened for about a month because a bunch of things, but it's mostly he refused to apologize to that stupid Tai Chi master.
Oh, why did he have to apologize?
Because the Tai Chi master, and I don't know the full story, the Tai Chi master is an Australian citizen, but he somehow sued Xu Xiaodong in Chinese court, even though he's an Australian citizen. So he did this Tai Chi push hands with a strong man, and of course it was fake. So Xu Xiaodong called it out in 2000. I think it was 2016. It was pretty early. It was before. It was either right when or before Xu Xiaodong got famous. So Xu Xiaodong called it fake. And Chen Xiaolong, the Tai Chi guy, sued Xu Xiaodong in Chinese court, despite the fact that Chen Xiaolong is an Australian citizen. And he won the case because, he proved that, I guess he proved in Chinese court that Xu Xiaodong, like, slandered him or whatever, even though it wasn't really slander, right? If you did a fake thing, I don't know. I don't know how he won. But so Xu Xiaodong was required to pay a fine and apologize. And so, again, I interviewed Xu Xiaodong about this, but there's a lot of things in the fine lines that probably isn't being told. Why was it the money? Like, did Xu Xiaodong not have the money, or did he just refuse to apologize? What was it that got the social credit score reduced? Right? Was his social credit score reduced because it's like, oh man, you're a danger to society, or is it more like, I don't think he doesn't want to pay a fine, so he's not listening to like rules of Chinese society. So it's not because he's like speaking out. It's because, this guy just doesn't want to pay a fine, huh? And so what is the reason, right? In the West, we have this Western mentality that, people are censored, right? But maybe it's not that. It's more like the people who are, lower in credit score are more like, look at that. He's charged with this much of a fine. And he's kind of like bad mouthing, trying to refuse to pay a fine. What's that show about his character, right? I'm trying to see it from another side. So we can't always look at it from just a Western mentality.
Yeah, because I assumed that they didn't like him talking smack about Tai Chi Chuan because that was their golden child, if you will.
Yeah, and potentially that is a big part of it. But once he apologized, he did a public apology on one of China's biggest websites for a week, and I actually found the public apology. It's still up on Chinese social media, so I have it linked in that interview segment on Fight Commentary Breakdowns. But yeah, once he apologizes, his social credit score is back. So
they are shifting. They are changing.
It's complicated.
Because I saw something a few months back that the daughter of or granddaughter of Huan Jia, she still teaches Lost Track, Mitsong.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chinese government went to her to try to help her in any way they can to reverse engineer the forms and get the applications out of them to make it work again.
Wow. Okay, so
they're shifting.
Yeah, they're shifting. Oh, this is so bizarre. Right when Yu Chenghua got knocked out, you couldn't find anything on him on social media, but now you search on Chinese social media, it's back. Like all that footage of him fighting that girl and stuff like that, it's all back. It's so funny. There's
I don't know all this stuff. You're giving me information I didn't have before.
This stupid self-proclaimed third generation Wing Chun master fought a girl. He's like, that proves, I have to stick up for Wing Chun. He fought a girl.
I should have him spar with Holly.
One of your students?
Yeah, my girlfriend. That would be fun to watch.
So yeah, I take that back. He's not censored anymore. So, but yeah, he was for a while.
Interesting that he would run around making those claims. I think is he the one with the strong man that you mentioned?
Oh no, that's Chen Xiaowang. Chen Xiaowang's like the apparently a very famous Tai Chi guy from the Chen family of Tai Chi. Yeah, so I think Xu Xiaodong has this list of people that of course Chen Xiaowang's on the top of the list. There's a bunch of people like in the Tai Chi community that probably would never fight him. Chen Xiaowang's one of them, right? Another guy is the Wang Zhanjun and Wang Zhanhai. They're two brothers that you don't always talk smack about. And then there's this Tai Chi lady who you've seen on my channel who like makes people bunny hop and stuff like that. So she I don't smack talked her before, but yeah, the Wang Jun I believe was the one who did the very famous like fake push hands with Jack Ma's former bodyguard, was just like complete dumb stuff. So yeah, just a lot of dumb stuff.
What did the woman do that deserved being called out?
She just fake Tai Chi, like, oh, I make the person jump, fly like.
She was doing like fake push hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, woo, and then the person hops 60 feet backwards type of thing.
Yep. Because I was curious why you would target her, because I wouldn't think she would be talking smack, but just because of the demonstrations.
Yeah. Probably more. I mean, they're all connected to probably people in the National Athletic Commission or whatever. So, I don't know the full story. All I know is it was very hard to do combat sports for a while in China, and it's getting a little better, but there's still a lot of corruption. I guess we could just put it at that.
Well, you didn't lose your enthusiasm for martial arts after going there and experiencing it, so that's good.
I think I lost it for a while. I lost it in high school and college, man. And I credit Donnie Jeffcoat. Johnny Jeffcoat's a pretty famous actor, but he's a black belt in Kempo. And, I credit him for bringing my kind of love back, because what I saw in Kempo was a lot of stuff that we did in Kung Fu, but, trying to make it functional, right? That's what Kempo was doing. Kempo was trying to fuse all these Japanese and Chinese martial arts and trying to make them modern. Like Kempo and Kaji Kempo, a lot of these systems were the original MMA. If there was something called mixed martial arts back in the day, they wouldn't have called themselves Kempo. They would have called themselves mixed martial arts. So,
or
like
you go back further and it was Kung Fu. I mean, that's what they were doing back then too.
Kung Fu was mixed martial arts. Yeah.
It makes sense. You're going to take what works and leave behind, especially if your life depends on it.
Yeah.
You're not going to practice things that are ineffective, or meet somebody and get your ass kicked and say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to adopt it and move on and evolve.
Yeah, totally.
When did you start BJJ?
I started in 2018.
Okay.
So I trained it for a few months, and then I unfortunately got hurt. But that was mostly because I had a lot of imbalances in my body. So, and that's what I've been doing this year under the lockdown. I've been fixing a lot of imbalances. So nice. I've been fixing my neck a lot. My neck's gotten stronger, but I can still feel a little imbalanced because it's I still have a little forward neck posture. So it's something it's going to take. It took me years and years to have this forward neck posture. So it's going to take years and years to fix.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Give it time. What
did you you got hurt doing BJJ, or you just got hurt?
We were rolling and a guy kneed me in the head.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate, but stuff like that happens, and it makes you realize that the thing about I think a lot of martial arts training, and I think things like boxing and Muay Thai do this very well, is that instead of like you learn a few things and then the first class you're sparring, instead you like learn some basic fundamentals first before you spar, right? That's what boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, a lot of these striking sports that are combat sports oriented do very well. So when they do throw you into sparring, you kind of already have a few skills that you're now testing skills. You're not just swimming, right? And I think in jiu-jitsu, why a lot of people get hurt so early is because they're swimming for so long, and I get it. A lot of those moves, you can't really learn them unless you like do it on a resisting opponent. But I think there's something to be said about jiu-jitsu training. It's like maybe for the first month, just really pound the techniques in their heads and then throw them on the mats or something. There's got to be some way, because if you only know a few things, you're literally just like swimming, and it's very easy for you to get hurt.
So it's interesting. So you started rolling right away.
Yeah. I mean, most jiu-jitsu schools, you rolled your first class.
Well, yeah, that's so you wanted to, you asked if to find out more of my background in this podcast. So I'll share this with you.
Mm-hmm.
When I started BJJ myself, I tried 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And the first place I went, I said it was a few towns away from where my school is.
Uh-huh.
I called the guy up. I told him who I was. I said, listen, I want to start as a white belt. I don't know anything about this. I don't pretend to know anything about it. I won't start me just like you would anybody else from the beginning, from the ground up. Oh, yeah. Come on in. Come on in. So I go to one class. It was good. Everything was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Come back Wednesday. Can you come back Wednesday? And I come back Wednesday, and we started class the same way. We warm up, we drill, and then throws me in and has me rolling, and they tried to wipe the floor with me.
Oh,
I
man.
left with a torn ear,
Ugh.
broken toe, a tweaked elbow.
Ugh.
Second class.
Yeah.
So the guy asked where I went, why I didn't come back. I said, look, I told you I was a beginner,
Yeah.
that I was starting from scratch, and that's what happens on my second class.
Yeah.
Get it. So then I moved on. I tried doing the Gracie stuff. I thought about doing the distance. They had started an instructor training program.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about doing that for a little bit, but the cost was exorbitantly high.
Uh-huh.
I just couldn't do it. Didn't make sense for my school. So then I found somebody else through a friend, and I was rolling and working with him. Everything seemed okay, except it was a lot of rolling right off the bat. But it was okay. I didn't mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day he just kind of snapped and tore my arm out 3 times. When we were rolling. 2 Americanas and a Kimura. Destroyed my shoulder to the point that I couldn't use my arm for months. I went through a year and a half of trying to find physical therapy and doctors to get back.
Wow.
Anyway, so by the time I found the instructor that I stayed with, I was in your position where I was like, man, I want to learn this, but this is not how I teach my students. I don't bring them into Mantis Boxing and say, all right, you're going to spar your first class. And we're going to blast your head off. Go full contact. No, you teach people how to do stuff first. So when I went to the 3rd try, I called him up and I was talking to him. We met for coffee first. And I told him what happened. And he just looked at me and he said, Randy, I'm not going to have you roll until I teach you how to roll. All right. So I'm sold. There you go. That's what I was looking for. And we spent probably, so I did privates with him too. That was the other thing. And we spent probably the first 6 lessons, no rolling.
Wow. So
it can be done right. It can be done well. But I agree with you. There's just too much of that, and people get hurt, and then they get turned off from it. They don't want to come back.
And I just the place I went to, the first class, he actually taught 2 privates to me. You know, they were very short privates, right? But they were like 2 privates. So I was like, oh, okay. And then after that, it was like, okay, well, teach some stuff, and then at the end of the class, roll. And the roll was it started out light, but like you said, it just feels like you got to give students like what you did, like at least 6 or 8 privates, 10 privates. Every student needs to have like 10 privates. So they're not just spazzing on the mat. They're like, oh, there are these moves I can go for. Like they're focused. It's not like, you know, it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go for Americana. Oh, I'm gonna, oh, I know what this is. Oh, I'm gonna escape. I'm gonna, you know, you can't just have
too much going on. It's you got to build a framework first. And you could do it in a group class format. We do. Somebody comes in, we pair them off with somebody we know is going to be relaxed and calm, even though we know they could be excited or full of angst because they're afraid. So the new person might be the one that's going too hard, but we put them with somebody that's mature enough. Is probably a good way to put it. That can control the situation. So people don't get hurt. Or what? Here's a question for you. What's wrong? in a martial arts class, many martial arts, wrestling, BJJ, boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, what's wrong with stopping and asking your partner to slow down? Or,
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
but it's not condoned, or it's not emphasized. It's not put out there for people.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
there's two people. So if I have, let's say I had two white belts, either
Yeah.
in Mantis or BJJ, and they're going at it, and they start going harder and harder,
Yeah.
I'll stop it.
Yeah.
And then it's both people, it's both sides' fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because nobody, if you didn't stop and say, hey, can you slow down? Or
Yeah.
if you did, you asked the person to slow down and they didn't, or you asked them to hit you lighter and they didn't, they keep trying to hit you full on, then it's their fault.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
if you didn't ask, you didn't take part in that conversation, if you will, then it's both people are to blame.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. The second time I got hurt doing jiu-jitsu, I didn't communicate, right? The guy told me he was going to go soft, and he didn't. And I should have been like, yo, what are you doing?
There's a lot of memes about that, right?
Yeah. So the second time I was like, as much as he was being a jerk, because he told me he wanted to roll with me, I told him, dude, I'm a beginner, dude. He's like, it's okay. I'm a beginner. And so he told me so he was just having a bad day. He probably just want to hurt someone. But I should have been like, dude, you're going really, really hard, man. But I didn't, right? So it's hard sometimes. Communication, man, it's really hard. And I had examples where I did it correctly. Like I remember after the first time I got hurt doing jiu-jitsu, I tried out another jiu-jitsu place, and the guy was like a little dude who had such an ego. Like we weren't even rolling, we're just practicing moves, and he was like going full force. I yelled at him. I'm like, dude, we're trying to perfect a move right now. Why are you he was like pushing so hard? I'm like, you're not supposed to go force against force. The whole point is to find the leverage. I yelled at him twice, and then they paired me with someone else. But that was good communication. I didn't give a fuck at that point, because I was hurt once. The injury was fresh in my mind. So I was like, okay, this guy's not hurting me again. In fact, if I were to go force, we would have gotten into a fight. I probably would have beat him. Not to say I was a good fighter, but he was little. It's just, and I was like, I remember I was thinking about that. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna get too mad at him. I didn't get hurt. The school realized, they paired me with someone else who was very much more about just learning the technique, and it worked out. But I remember I was talking to some of my friends who are coaches, right? And I was like, dude, why are there always these people?
Well, it's also the theory I have on big versus small, because you'll hear bigger guys talk about how they'd rather fight another big guy than a small guy, because the small guy's crazy. They say things. It's like, but if you put in perspective, right? When you're big and strong, and things are not going your way in a fight, you always have strength to fall back on.
Yeah.
It's like you're in a different reality, because you always have that reserve. It's like if your car had a spare gas tank, and you were driving 400 miles and you're on E, but you know that you have that reserve tank, so you don't have to worry. It's going to get you another 100 miles for a gas tank. You're out in the middle of the desert. But if you don't have that gas tank, you don't have that reserve, then you're nervous. You're anxious.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have that. It's like, so I think that has a lot to do with angst of smaller fighters.
In
general, is it's not that they have a chip on their shoulder. It's like they've probably been pushed around and beat on a lot, and it's like they don't have that reserve to rely on of strength. So just gonna go at it.
Yeah, it's. I think that's something, and I think after a while you start trying to think about other people's perspectives, and really it comes down to that. You're just like, some of these people who might be a little bit meaner on the mats or unprofessional or whatever word, sometimes it's just like maybe they were just pushed around too much in their lives, so they don't know how to tune it down, or they're trying to get back at society. It doesn't mean they're justified in what they're doing, but at least you try to understand them. Try to understand them.
It's the mats are the greatest therapy there is that I've seen and experienced myself. And they change us, and we learn more about ourselves on the mats than I think we will anywhere else in life. but it's not always a kind process.
Yeah.
And hopefully for those of us that are a little more disturbed when we start and going into it, that we don't hurt somebody seriously
Yeah. Yeah.
while we work through our baggage.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's ultimately the second guy that hurt me doing jiu-jitsu. I think that's ultimately the sort of the lesson I came to. It's just like, well, he didn't do permanent damage to my spine. You know, he whiplashed my neck. But the thing is, it was muscular. So there was no, like, I got an MRI. There was no spinal injury. So the only thing it did was, you know, it gave me headaches for like 8 months.
So
but
you got traumatic brain injury.
I don't think I did. It was just a spinal thing.
No, in the brain, like if you were having headaches for months and everything, that's a good sign. I'm not a doctor, but
Yeah, it wasn't. It was tension headaches in the back of the neck.
It wasn't. You said whiplash, so I thought you got the boom.
So yeah, I didn't hit the mat. He kind of almost kicked me, so he didn't even do like a jiu-jitsu. He kind of kicked me, so I fell on my butt and my head whiplash. So yeah, I didn't hit the mat.
Good.
Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly. So, but you know, it messed up my neck for a long time. But thank goodness it wasn't a structural problem. It was just, you know, fascia, muscle, and stuff like that. But
it's also months of recovery, and that costs money too.
My point in saying that story was it didn't do permanent damage, and all it did was it made me strengthen my neck. So at the end of the day, it's just like, okay, I mean, I could be mad at him, but first of all, he was a little guy too, so he's probably bullied all his life. Second of all, his name was Dickie, you know, so he probably made fun of all his life. I realized that. I was like, you know, like, okay, whatever. Hopefully I'm the last person he takes out whatever anger on.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, if he doesn't change, it's not my thing to judge him. But you know what? He took out a little anger. He didn't hurt me permanently. It just, all it did was it made me stronger. You know, in a way I have to be thankful. But, you know, I remember I was thinking about that. I was like, because I forgot what his name was. And I was like, oh, yeah, his name was Dickie. Like, it's like so funny. You get hurt by a guy named Dickie. You know, people are making fun of his name all his life and it makes him a dick, you know?
It's pretty mature of you to have that hindsight.
Yeah, because what else can I do? You know, maybe I'll train to be like a really cool MMA fighter and fight him one day. Like, what's the point of that? You know, I got a life to live. So I was like, yeah, it was one of those moments. I'm like, in anything, if anything, one, I'm thankful because my neck's much stronger now, and two, it's no permanent damage. So what? There's no reason to get mad. I mean, all I do is I feel bad for him now. He's just a guy who still has a chip on his shoulder. He has 2 kids or something like that. Last time I checked on Instagram. You know, you have 2 kids. Why do you have a chip on your shoulder? You have a beautiful family, right? All I can do is just kind of like try to understand them, but also be like, okay, whatever.
I had an injury like that, aside from the shoulder, but I had my LCL almost completely detached from the femur in a X-guard situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a little while to not be ticked off at the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But it was both of us. So it was something that ultimately I didn't know how to defend against X-guard.
Mm-hmm.
What worked on most people was just using kind of drilling down into them with force.
Yeah.
And they would break and they would open up and then you could pass.
Yeah.
For him, and so both of us were too unfamiliar. For him, it was a new move. He was a blue belt.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that he didn't understand because he was a blue belt. He didn't understand the dangers of it. Like what can go wrong with someone's knee if you force the X guard in the wrong position. So 2 of us together made this situation where like I came down hard, he exploded up, and my knee just went pop. You could hear it. But you have to overcome those injuries and get some perspective on it and realize that it took 2 of us to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the story I told you, it's the same thing. Eventually I was like, yeah, as much as I assumed he communicated. I didn't communicate with him, right? Maybe I should have been like, oh, yo, what do you do, man? You said you go soft. What do you do?
Yeah.
I should have done that because
It's hard. Our egos get in the way, right? It takes over.
He said he was going soft, so I assumed he would just like keep going soft, but he didn't go soft. So like you said, it really takes two, and sometimes even if it's 90% the other person's fault, there's still 10% a little bit of you, right? So It's like ultimately whatever. I got a stronger neck from this. That's all that matters.
No, and you have I think a healthy perspective on it too.
Yeah, because what it did was the second injury made me realize, okay, like I didn't want to stop martial arts, right? So that was like, oh, well, that was also something. It's a good test to see if I wanted to stop martial arts. And so eventually when I took up boxing again, I was like, okay, well, you know what? I still love martial arts. It's just maybe I don't want to do jiu-jitsu for now. Doesn't mean I don't want to do jiu-jitsu in the future, but I can still do other martial arts.
You find the right environment, and it might be a completely different experience.
Yeah. And it's like, there was just certain things. Like, I'm pretty underweight. I'm just a guy with a fast metabolism. So one of my friends was a coach who sometimes helps me. He kept telling me, Jerry, just gain some weight, man. That's harder. That's very hard for someone who can't gain weight. For people who can't lose weight, it's hard to tell them to lose weight. And for people who can't gain weight, it's hard for telling them to gain weight. But I was like, you're right. I should have listened to you a year ago. I'm just going to try to gain weight and then, just make my neck stronger. So whatever I do, I'm going to be a little bigger and I'm going to make my neck stronger always. So it's a blessing. Whatever I do, if I take a Muay Thai in the future, if I take a whatever, wrestling, my neck's going to be stronger.
How long have you been doing boxing?
Let's see, how long has it been? It's been about 4 months.
Nice. Good.
So, yeah, it's been about 4 months. And again, I haven't done any hard sparring, but I know the neck exercises have been working because, I've been jabbed in the face a few times and I'm okay. So, okay, that's good. That's good. So the neck exercises, there's a lot of validity to them.
And I assume you haven't been able to go to the gym recently, right?
Yeah, it's on the beach.
Oh, it's on the beach.
It's on the beach.
Nice.
So ventilated, no worries of, yeah.
That's good.
It's interesting because there's a lot of good to training on the sand, right? You develop a lot of good fascia, a lot of good stabilizer muscles on your legs and your hips and stuff like that, and your glutes and your lower back. It's a complete workout. But it's probably going to get in the way of some of your movement too, because you're probably moving a little too hard because the sand gives way, right? So like your muscles used to the sand. So when you start, if you do spar someone, let's say on the grass or on the ring or something, or if you get into a real fight, God forbid, somewhere, you're going to probably have to be like, oh wait, you got to adjust some of your movements a little.
It's kind of like when you stand in a door frame and you push, hold it for a minute, and then you let go and your arms just float up.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's something, just because the sand, because it gives way, in a way, it's almost like my stances are probably a little bit more kung fu. And my boxing coach just pointed it out to me. It's like, oh, your stances sometimes are too low. But it's just like, it's hard not to, it's not hard to, because the sand's giving way, right? So like it's very easy for you to kind of like trip a little if you don't slightly go a little lower than what's usual in boxing. And a lot of times, like I'm doing stuff and like almost trip, and it's like the coach is like, Jerry, what's going on? I'm like, it's not always my fault. Sometimes it's just the sand. The sand's uneven, So it's like, so in a very weird way, it's like how the stances in southern styles of kung fu, northern styles too, but southern styles are very low, right? And then you think about the lineage of like, especially Shaolin kung fu. It came from Kali Priyatu, or however you say it, in India. It's like an Indian martial art that went to Shaolin. And then you think about the Indian martial arts, why are their stances so low? Did they train on the beach? Like, you think about that, right? The environment influences a lot of how the moves are. So if they're training on boats, if they're training on sand, if they're training in the forest, there's going to be some differences in how they stand. And a lot of times we forget that. We forget that the context, the environment, all we see is this in a vacuum.
Yes, true. Very true. Although I'm gonna blow your mind a little bit on that history. That's not actually the history of Shaolin.
Mm-hmm.
So check out Peter Lorge's book
Mm-hmm.
on the Shaolin martial arts. You'll find it very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Where he actually talks about the monks, the Buddhist monks didn't do martial arts.
Uh-huh.
That they had warrior monks. And the warrior monks were really people that were brigands and thugs
Ah.
that could fight,
Uh-huh.
because Shaolin was actually very wealthy.
Uh-huh.
They owned lands, farmlands, and they needed to protect them. So they would go out and they would get these fighters, brawlers, boxers, and they would bring them back, and they would shave their heads and they would wear robes, but they were drinking and womenizing and going to whorehouses at night, and they were not Buddhist. So it's quite a different history than that, the story that you and I were both told about coming from India and being a totally different origin story than what the reality is.
Yeah, yeah. You know, what you bring up is so important because depending on who you ask, there's so many different origins for different styles of Kung Fu, right? You know, we mentioned Wing Chun in the beginning. Even Wing Chun, depending on who you ask. Like some people say, oh yeah, it was that warrior nun lady who passed it to the lady named Wing Chun, right? But if you ask other non-Ip Man branches of Wing Chun, they're like, no, there was a lot of Omei influence and a lot of other Taoist influence. So it wasn't like a Shaolin, it wasn't just a Shaolin branch, a kind of offshoot. So it's like, depending on who you ask, and you know, there's probably truth to all sides. Yeah.
Have you heard of Ben Judkins?
Why does that name sound familiar?
Dr. Ben Judkins, he runs a blog called Kung Fu Tea.
Oh, this guy. Okay.
And he's a professor at Cornell, but he has a book that you probably want. It's a Wing Chun history book.
Interesting.
So that's what's really cool that's going on the last few years. There's a group out of, Dr. Paul Bowman helped start it. It's called Martial Arts Studies Group. And it's a lot of academic scholars that are also lifelong martial artists. And they're starting to uncover the actual origins and histories of some of these martial arts styles. That's
great, man.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Wow. There was this dude, I'm trying to find him on Twitter now. He created his own graph. He's trying to map the entire real history of Wing Chun through the lineage. And it was brilliant what he did. There's like so many people I've never heard of, but like, you know, when you think Wing Chun, you think Ip Man and you think Yuan Qishan, Yong Kai San, but those are just like the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other people that like taught both of them and stuff like that. If his like lineage big chart is true, but it was so cool to see like people really put work into this. It's like instead of just being about ego, like my school's better than yours, why don't we just get to the bottom of this, right? And that's what Fight Commentary Breakdowns was trying to do. It's like, let's get to the bottom of what's cool in fighting, what works in fighting, etc. And that's why I started the channel.
Well, some people have a lot invested into these stories.
Of course.
And they stand to lose a lot if the stories aren't true or they're debunked, or you found out that your style was fake. And it's hard. I mean, if you talked a lot today about putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and I look at that same thing with Mantis, because there's a lot of Mantis teachers that don't like what I do or don't appreciate what I do, and I'm okay with it. I understand, but they're wrapped up in a narrative that I don't subscribe to. And let's move on. But some people are not ready to move on when we're ready to move on. Like, I started my channel 5 years ago with the intent of trying to fix Mantis Boxing. To highlight, one, to keep it alive, because it's pretty much dead. There's a very small number of people doing it or even know about it. So let's get it back out there, for one, but let's also highlight people that use Mantis and can make the stuff work for real. But it ended up that I couldn't get people on board. Nobody wanted to work together, collaborate. They they just have their own narratives, their own agendas. And so it ended up just becoming my channel. But at first it was designed to bring in all these different teachers and masters, teachers, coaches, experts in their particular fields. But you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah.
So.
And I'll say, just from my experience with my channel, as your channel grows, some people will come around, because I started my channel. I thought, okay, every day I'm going to bring a different expert to analyze the fight with me. And of course it wasn't like that. For a while, it was just me. Right? If you look at a lot of the most viral videos, it's just me. But then
I wish I knew. I would have joined you for that. I love that.
No, I wish I met you back then. I actually knew Sensei Ando in 2016 when I created the channel. But at that point, I don't remember. I think the company I was working for at the time, like, I reached out to Sensei Ando through my company at first. So like, he didn't know I had a channel, right? So the company I worked for had a bad rap. So I was nervous to like contact Sensei Ando after I quit the company. I was like, oh, he associates with me with this company. Oh no, what if he doesn't like me? Like, you know, it's like we don't take risks, right? And it's like, I haven't reached out to Sensei Ando until now. It's like, now I have this big channel. I'm like, hey, dude, remember me? He's like, oh, I remember you. But it's like, I could have reached out to him, and then I would have known you too, right? I could have just done that in 2016, but I was just scared because the company I was working for that I quit had issues. And then when I started Fight Commentary, I was working at another company. In fact, this is the company that's about to get their fucking app banned. You know, TikTok? I used to work for the parent company of TikTok.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, I went through a pretty interesting journey while I was YouTubing, but the beauty is I kept up this channel. You know, it's the definition of Kung Fu, right? I kept up this channel. I never stopped after work. Every day after work, I would spend 8 hours on the channel. So I lost a lot of hair, slept very late, but it was worth it. But the reason I'm saying this is when the channel got bigger, like once I passed like the 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 mark, it was very easy to get martial artists to come on the channel after that. So that's like encouragement for you. You'll keep getting bigger. You'll keep doing this, and you'll get more and more martial artists that want to come on your channel.
It's not just martial art, because I was specifically had focused on Mantis at first, my channel, and that's what I was looking for with other Mantis teachers. And some did come around. Some are really cool. It does change, but it's more niche.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
But yeah, Ando's been on our channel a few times, and we do some collaborations. He's a good guy.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see where the journey goes, man. But yeah, like you said, I think both our channels are just trying to figure it out, so to speak.
Is this a new channel for you that you're putting this on, or is this the same channel that you've been running?
My chats channel, so it's a new channel.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So the thing is, I realized that I was spreading myself too much on my big channel, so it was messing up my channel because viewers claim they want to hear interviews, but they don't. Nobody. The thing about people is they don't care about others as much as we care about others. Like you and I, the reason like we're doing what we're doing is we care about others, but most people don't care as much as we do. So like it's a hard red pill realization I had, and I resisted it for a while because I'm like, dude, why can't my viewers be as interested about other people as I am? And it's nothing wrong.
They're not there for that. Yeah. So I have that conflict on my channel with because I have videos for both Mantis and BJJ. Yeah. And the BJJ videos get very limited views from the Mantis.
Yeah. So basically, I had the same struggle, and what I would tell you is learn from my mistake, which is separate the channels. So I created a separate channel on BJJ, and I created a separate channel on interviews because those were the two topics I knew I would always do, but I knew the main audience didn't give a rat's ass about. And instead of getting angry, which I'm still a little angry about, I was like, okay, let's just accept it and let's build separate, related but separate brands.
Right.
Because what would happen is, here's the thing about the YouTube algorithm. If your videos keep not getting views, YouTube's going to think something's wrong with you, and then it's not going to recommend your videos to all the people that are subscribed to you. So that's what was happening to me. And I was kind of sad for like a week. And after that week, I'm like, okay, I know what to do. BJJ videos go to a different video. Interviews go to a different video. They're never going to mess with my average watch duration of my fight commentary breakdowns anymore. But it took 2 years. You talk about egos. It took 2 years of it, man. I knew this 2 years ago. I just resisted it. I didn't want to have 3 fight commentary brands, but I had to because it got to the point where the survival of my main channel was at risk.
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. I thought it more of like, well, this is what I do. This is who I am. So share who you are. But it does affect the views and the recommendations, I can tell.
Yeah. And you can share who you are in 3 channels. If someone really likes you, they'll follow all 3 of your channels. Think like that. And that's what I realized. Like, some of my fight commentary audience went to fight commentary BJJ, and more of them are going to fight commentary chats. So that's cool. You know, even if out of like however many people that are subscribed to fight commentary breakdowns, only 100 want to subscribe to all 3. That's cool. 100 people get me. That's great. You know, we can only have like 100 real friends anyway. So if I have 100 virtual people that get me, that's good. Yeah,
good way to look at it.
It's developing all this like social media stuff. It's like a martial art in itself, man. It's a lot of parallels, like ego, not embracing change. A lot of it's the same.
This is true. This is true. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, now you gave me some perspective on it.
Think about what I've gone through and then like learn from that, because you don't want to have a channel that gets really big and then you have to like make the separation. You know, it's better to develop all 3 concurrently. So develop your BJJ channel, develop your interview channel, develop your management channel concurrently, so they all get big at the same time. And then you have 3 sources of income instead of like 1 source of income. And then, oh no, these 2 are just kind of like things I dump all the other stuff that the main audience don't care about.
Yeah, it's funny because I have a channel on just my hang gliding videos. And I realize it with that because if I posted that on my Mantis Boxing and Jiu Jitsu channel, who's going to watch that?
Yeah.
I know it in that regard, but I refuse to change it on the
the martial arts thing. But it's something I had to go through, and I think you're gonna do that too. It's unfortunate. We want to be known as martial artists, but the audience, unfortunately, it's like, oh, I want to see him do jiu-jitsu. I want to see him do Mantis. I want to see him do this. I want to see him, you know, talk about martial arts. I want to see him react to stuff, right? They put you, and part of it's the machine. It's the audience plus the machine algorithm together boxes you. So you can either accept, okay, I'm going to get boxed and I'll just put myself in many boxes, or I try to put myself in one box and screw myself over.
Right. Then I get nobody.
Yeah.
Well, like that age-old saying, you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one.
Yeah.
I guess the same goes true for Google's algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. Facebook too. I mean, I have a Facebook account, but I realize I need to separate it too. But Facebook is one of those things. It's not like I'm making any revenue on Facebook anyway. So it's like at that point, I'm just like, whatever. If there was money involved, maybe I'll do it. But Facebook is like, that'll be my place to kind of like not care about branding.
I shut that down, I think 3 years ago. I just walked away from the platform and decided to focus just on YouTube. But not that that's right, because I mean you've got a lot more subscribers than I do, so I just don't. That's not my primary game. And like you said, it's like, where are you going to invest your time? You're not making any revenue. It's not. It's like it turns into a situation where I like your video and you like mine just because I liked yours, and there's this obligation going on, but there's not really like people aren't even watching your video. They just thumbs up because they're supposed to.
But anyways, this is a pretty good stopping point, man.
It is. I got to get to a class pretty soon that I'm running.
Totally, man. Randy, please come back. And next time, you know, maybe we could do something like we could both react to some Kung Fu clip together or something. We'll figure out something.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We'll do the commentary thing you do. We'll look at some stuff. That would be fun. I would like that.
Exactly.
But thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So for viewers, this was Fight Commentary Chats. Of course, if you follow Fight Commentary Chats, you probably follow Fight Commentary Breakdowns. This is Randy. I will link everything we talked about, including his channel. His channel is most important. Go check out his Mantis.
Thank you very much, and BJJ. I'll change that this week.
Cool, man. Keep me posted if you create a separate channel for BJJ, because I'll subscribe to you with my BJJ. We'll build each other there.
Sounds good.